Welcome to this edition of Weather to Watch. It's Monday, the 26th of May, 2025. Got a first tropical weather system, more soggy weather for much of the U.S., and cooler weather to boot. Hello, everyone. Here's a look at the Weather to Watch for today on Memorial Day, and it's a Monday. Much of the Northeast is enjoying very nice weather. We still have very stubborn weather systems producing persistent rains, thunderstorms, batches of severe weather in the nation's midsection, especially the further south you go, down into Oklahoma, Texas, and Louisiana. Meanwhile, the West Coast is mostly fair, but there are a couple of thunderstorms and showers popping up from time to time. The 500 millibar flow is weak and somewhat chaotic. I mean, we have little waves moving around like this. Some of these are actually induced by the thunderstorms themselves. That, for instance, is a leftover swirl from activity 12 hours ago. Here's another little disturbance moving through the Rockies. You can pick out all these small little disturbances. It's starting to look a lot more like a summertime map, which is to be expected since we are gradually making the transition now from a springtime pattern to a more summertime pattern. We're not there yet, but we're getting there slow but sure. Let's take a look at some surface parameters. Here's the surface map. On this Monday, we have a nice area of high pressure over Lake Superior, bringing very cool weather to the northern plains. And the transition zone can obviously be seen here across the southern U.S. with a series of fronts draped through Texas, Arkansas, Louisiana, eastward through Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, even into the Carolinas. So it definitely does separate the air masses. In fact, if we take a look at station plots, here's a quick primer on how to read these. These always point in the direction that the wind is going. One of these full ones is 10 knots, so just over 10 miles per hour. So the winds are definitely coming out of the east-northeast on the lower side of that high I just showed you. And temperatures are in the 60s here in Springfield. It's 60 degrees. It's only 58 up around Topeka and only 59 in Dodge. Meanwhile, it's 88 degrees down in Biloxi. So very, very different contrast of air. The dew point down there is a sweltering 72, whereas the dew points in the upper plains are in the mid-50s, or even some 40s. St. Louis at 46, and those dew points drop into the 30s if you go up closer to that high in the northern plains. Here's a satellite loop of that area, kind of detailed, showing a blow-up of thunderstorms in the Rockies, aided by that little tiny shortwave I showed you on the 500 millibar chart. Same with this activity forming in a chaotic sort of way. These type of thunderstorms can be severe. It is harder to get tornadoes out of these because the low-level wind flow is not there, primarily because there's nothing to force a low at the surface to develop, and that's really what gets your low-level winds going. Now, a lot of times you move into this pattern, it becomes the interactions of storms with boundary layers, and also outflow boundaries, like this one right here. See this arch in the clouds right here? That's an outflow boundary. So it's possible that these storms that are developing down here deep in Texas may interact with the end of this later on this evening, and that may be the impetus for an isolated tornado event down there. Flood watch in effect for southern Arkansas, much of the northeast Texas area, including Dallas, Fort Worth, and northern part of Louisiana. This is a tornado watch here. When I froze this, it was a tornado warning there, right on the border between Mississippi and Alabama. And then this is a severe thunderstorm watch down here. And it looks like there might have been an embedded tornado watch in that here briefly. Well, let's take a look at that severe weather outlook just for today. So for the remainder of Monday, there are 2 areas of level 2 out of 5 severe weather in the panhandle of Texas and an elongated area from south central Texas all the way over to Mississippi. An enhanced risk exists down here where I was showing you that activity. So east of Austin and those areas, west of Austin, west of San Antonio is the highest risk. And indeed, the tornado parameter is set at 5% chance within a 25-mile area in those very same areas, stopping just short of Midland. And so, yeah, a pretty high probability, and a stretched out 2% that lasts eastward all the way to Mississippi and Alabama. And as you might expect, some heavy rain is definitely falling from these showers and storms. Well, it's not going to let up, and this has been a week of slow-moving weather systems. The severe weather and heavy rain started here, then went to here, and now it's gone to here, and then slowly through the week it's going to stretch out this way. So this is precipitation for the next 5 days. And you see a few pockets there of 4 or 5 inch rain totals in Louisiana, getting over into parts of Mississippi and Alabama, maybe even in the hill country, and just off to the west of San Antonio and Austin. There might be totals rivaling that amount as well. And for the drought index, this was released on May 22nd. I think they released a new one. They may have today. Anyway, well, you get an idea. Much of the drought in the Northeast has been alleviated. Some of it in the northern plains. Trying to take care of this right here, even though the activity is scattered, which is one main problem. And a new segment now on weather to watch. Now that we're getting into the season, we're going to take a look at the tropical Atlantic and Pacific for the possibility of tropical storms or hurricanes. Well, in the immediate future, the Atlantic is quiet, although I'll show you something here in a minute. But in the Pacific, we're getting our probably first named storm of the year, Alvin, by Wednesday. Here's what the Hurricane Center is thinking the track of that thing will be, kind of east or west-northwest, right off the coast of Mexico, not really affecting Mexico at all. If we take a look at the vapor transport, this is where the deep vapor is getting concentrated, and you can see it definitely wants to take that storm up to the north, eventually northwest, and it aims right at the southern tip of Baja there before it finally weakens in much cooler water. That's over the next 7 days. And I want you to notice here, too, in the Gulf, there might be some activity at the tail end of this front here. We'll take a look at that and see if that develops anything, but I think that would be even beyond the capability of this forecast. So it's kind of a stretch at this point. But yeah, we get activity sometime at the tail end of fronts in June in the Gulf all the time. Here's the 500 millibar flow. This is the EPS, so this is the ensemble. Big old low developing in the Central Plains. This just spells cool and stable air. And look how deep it cuts. It gets reinforced by a little shortwave. So all the southeast, all the Great Lakes in the northeast. This is a severe weather killer, by the way. It's very hard to get severe thunderstorms to develop under those conditions. Then a ridge builds in here. And then finally we get a flow west, trough in the west is good for severe weather. But notice it's displaced well off to the northwest. So this isn't really a severe weather maker for the traditional areas, which would be here. But it is going to trigger severe thunderstorms likely in here. And by the way, this loop goes about to Tuesday of next week. So it starts to get into real fantasy land. But mostly, though, the good news for all the tornadoes we've had this year is that the traditional areas for tornado formation have been shut down due to this feature right here. In fact, let's look at some temperature patterns here and show you how cool it is. If you see green and blue, it's below normal. And so this is the forecast for tomorrow, Tuesday. A good chunk of the country is centered right where I showed you, much, much below normal temperatures, with highs in some places barely getting into the low 60s here for late May. And the west is heating up, as you might expect, with that ridge of high pressure developing. And then we go to Thursday. The pattern barely moves. Very, very cool. In fact, it spreads more east and southeast, if anything else. Florida is about normal with temperatures near 90. And we're starting to see a lot of 90s in Idaho, parts of northern Nevada, as this pattern, this ridge starts to build. And then we go 2 more days into the future for Saturday, and it's showing that it gets even hotter out west with 100s in the interior of California. So the actual numbers on here are the highs for the various cities. And finally, the northern plains begin to heat up and spread some of that to where the cool has been, but it's still pretty prominent here over the next couple of days. In fact, if we take a look at the 6 to 10 day temperature forecast, it does, no surprise, Sunday through Thursday. It looks like it's going to be very cool down here in the southeast, certainly with above normal temperatures in the northern plains. And the precipitation pattern is basically a little bit heightened out over the western U.S. and pretty dry in areas that don't really need a lot of rain and have gotten a lot so far this year. It looks like it's going to calm down out in the Ohio Valley and Tennessee River Valley. Thanks for watching this edition of Weather to Watch. It comes out every other day, or as the weather necessitates. Please remember to share this with your friends, subscribe to the channel, or at the very least, like what you just watched. Thanks.